Hello, this is Backyard Reads. Today we are talking about the Ramayana, Ramayana? I'm not sure. I might have completely butchered that. I have no idea. However, that's besides the point. And first off, to say that this is an epic of translated, retold epic of India, specifically supposedly set in the second era, in which there's like four eras of Indian mythology. There's like the first era, which is the mythic era, with all these gods, where like humanity was almost no different to God. And then with each era, there's like more sin, and sin is kind of not exactly the perfect word for it, but yeah, as each era goes, there's like a new sort of story that comes. Ramayana is set in the second era, and then there's the Mahabharata, which is set in the third era and ends at the beginning of the fourth era. And the Mahabharata is incredibly well known to the Hindus, and some parts of the Mahabharata are very well known to sort of the West, but specifically for the quote of "I am become death, destroyer of worlds." That's the Mahabharata. But this video is not about that. It's about the Ramayana. And it's supposedly written by the poet known as Valmiki. This book has a few illustrations, but really quite beautiful illustrations, and yeah, it's pretty cool. There was a film recently. Well, when I say recently, I think maybe last year, somewhat based on the second half of this epic, but again, not this specific version, because this is the English translation and it's retold. One thing that's for certain is that this is probably a lot shorter than the original story, and it's about 420-ish pages. It's quite a big book. It's not exactly the easiest read. If you're reading this for the first time, you're going to have a hard time, especially if you haven't read many books. Sort of on the same level of something like Fyodor, Crime and Punishment. It can be very wordy and kind of strange. It speaks of a lot of a spirituality, very common in the Indian epics. Very, very much unlike the other epics of, say, the Poetic Edda or the Iliad, the Odyssey, or so on. It's very much Hindu spiritualities. The main character, the titular Rama, which is one of the lives of Krishna or Vishnu / Buddha. Buddha is one of the incarnations of Rama, and that whole story, it begins with, I think it's Ravana. I'm not good at reading these names, and that's on me. It begins with Ravana kind of sacrificing each one of his heads in this sort of the spiritual way of giving up things in the kind of the Hindu sort of religion of asceticism. And then it ends with the gods going, "Oh shit, okay, you're really building up all this extra stuff, and we want to give you something in return." And he says, "Oh, I don't want to be conquered by anyone in the heavens or in the earth." And that is in reference to, say, the mythical creatures and the gods themselves. And he goes on to then conquer. He's basically invincible, and he conquers all the heavens and all these, and takes all these things, and he creates this massive kingdom, Sri Lanka, which you can see here. That's Ravana's, it's not Sri Lanka, it's Lanka. That's the place, but it's set in the real world place of Sri Lanka. One thing that I know that's common criticism, and I think it's one criticism is it says by people, it's well, I'll actually get that to that later, but it goes through this epic of Rama as born as a prince with his twin brother. He is exiled from his kingdom. He can't come back for, I think it's like 10, 20 years, living in exile in a way. Like, he's allowed to come back after a certain amount of time. After a certain amount of time, he can come back and claim his kingdom. But that's not the whole point of the story. What happens is that Ravana, like, as he's doing his conquest, he lands eyes on Rama's wife, and he falls in love. And he's just like, oh man, I just have to have her, right? I just have to have her. I won't take. And he goes and he kidnaps her, and then whisks her all the way off on this chariot to his land of Lanka. There he tries to seduce and get her to reciprocate his feelings, but she's a loyal woman. She loves her husband, and she won't do that. And it goes throughout, and that's where the second half, generally the second half of the book starts. And then at that point, the next rest of it is having to go there with all these sorts of warriors, like to go all the way to Lanka to get back his wife, because it's an unjust sort of kidnapping, and he needs to do it. And on the way, encounters these tribes of talking bears and talking monkeys who help him on his fight, along with this god called Hanuman, Hanuman is supposedly depicted in this illustration. This is the Thai interpretation of Hanuman. That's what I believe. But yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. Ooh, and like Hanuman is like Wukong from, say, Journey to the West, sort of an analog to Hanuman, or Wukong, also known as Goku, which is the Japanese version of Hanuman. That's besides the point. And there's all these magical and sort of fantastic things happen, especially in the battles near the major battle near the end. And then it ends with him finding his wife and all that. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that the book is told from the perspective of the poet who has been inspired. Okay, so it's all like, it's kind of a bit of a how do I put it? Almost meta in a way. That's probably the worst way to put it, but it's probably not the most accurate way to put it, but it's probably the most I can do. It's from the poet Valmiki himself, and it starts with him learning the story as he's writing it out, and he's teaching it to the sons of Rama at the same time. It's sort of strange in that way, and I think can catch some people a little bit off guard, but that's just how, what I've learned, that's just how it sort of is with the Indian epics, where it has this meta-narrative almost. Again, that might not be even the correct way to put it. And it ends with, like, the sons of Rama telling him the story of his own life in this poetic sort of way. It's kind of strange in that way, but it's like, if you want to get into epics that aren't just the standard epics, this is a pretty good one to go for. However, there are some bits of complaint that I have, is that there are moments in the story where it seems to just veer off into another sort of sub-story, that when you're listening to, you're reading it and just like, well, hang on, what? And it seems to not really quite make sense. Maybe it should have done it earlier, but you find this really important character, and then it's just like, oh wait, I'll completely explain a backstory of him. Oh, somewhat like Bucky, right? If you know, like Bucky, it has that sort of tendency to go into the backstory of a character as they are introduced a little bit, or there's a certain action that happens in the story, and then they go to a story that's somewhat related to it. It's sort of off track. It does that sort of thing with one of the I believe it's one of the gods, Garuda, I believe, which can be a bit confusing at first, but you can quickly wrap your head around. Controversy that I was about this story that some people have, in my opinion, wrongfully criticized it for, is the whole criticism of the bears and the monkeys, which some people interpret it as the sort of the less civilized or more primitive sort of peoples and all that, which is like kind of strange considering that in the actual mythology, monkeys and bears are sacred in a sort of way. Like, monkeys are considered like these really intelligent creatures. It doesn't have this sort of social commentary that it's not really social commentary, because one thing that you find in the Indian epics is that they tend to go for really big numbers. Like in the Mahabharata, there's this one bit where there's this guy who has like 1 million followers, as in like camp followers, as in people following him all over the world as he walks. And I hope I don't have to explain that 1 million people would cause a lot of problems just traveling, or just on foot, and that's a huge amount. But there is some sort of fantastical element to it, which is very evident in the Indian epics. If you had somewhat of an interest with the Hindu sort of like religions and the sort of general sorts of beliefs, it's a book that I would definitely recommend you read. But again, I do have the caveats that it can be a bit wordy at times, and it might be like off-putting. It's definitely not like a Western sort of story in which there's like very clear endings and all sorts of things. It feels dreamlike at times. I think it's a pretty decent book. That's my review of the Ramayana, retold by William Buck. Yeah,